but really the messages that I wanted to get across were, the opening in the book, which is there are ways to reach people and build consensus across the political divide. And here's the psychology around it. And then the last chapter of the book, which is climate change is really like we have the technical solutions, but it's really a symptom of a larger problem, which is
Yeah.
that we're moving away from the values that make human beings feel fulfilled and happy and live sort of satisfied lives.
Hey y'all, it's Becky here from The Box, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Becky, this is Rue, and you want to be in the video too. And every Tuesday and Thursday we talk about the climate here. The problems, yes, but the solutions, yes. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, go ahead and click that subscribe button below, hit the like, comment, share, all that good stuff. And today, I am going to show you me interviewing our latest Climate Book Club author. So we have been reading Climate Courage by Andreas Karelas. Where are you going? Now, Andreas is the founder and executive director of a nonprofit solar company called Revolve. And Revolve sets out to put solar panels on co-ops and nonprofits. So think like churches, schools. I can't think of other ones at the moment, but there are many nonprofits. So if you have a nonprofit in mind that you are either a part of or you are a fan of, then consider reaching out to them if they're in the US, and consider reaching out to Andreas at Revolve to possibly get solar panels up there. He also, again, is an author of this book. So this book is great. It talks about so many different things and some aspects of the climate movement that I feel like aren't discussed enough, such as community-based action, conservative voices in the movement, how much jobs and economic growth moving towards renewable energy will result in, and how communities of color and faith-based movements are all impacting the renewable energy movement. So if those sound like interesting topics that you would like to explore more, I highly recommend you check out this book, and please enjoy the interview that I did with Andreas. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and writing this book. Readers like me, I needed to hear the community aspect, because that's something that I just really did not think about much, because we really don't focus on the community aspect hardly at all. We focus on individual, we focus on business, and we focus on government.
Yes.
Right? But the community aspect is often missing. And then advocating for conservative voices in the climate change movement is also a really important thing that I think is missing too. Ultimately, we all have the same goals of doing the same sort of thing of advocating for the climate and making sure that it's prioritized in both of our parties. So, yeah.
100%. And that's the thing for me. And I think that so many people overlook is that, we see the world as polarized, which it largely is, right? You look at the country and you say, wow, it's split down the middle, right? Like people are, adamantly, conservative or liberal, and there's not much common ground. And yet, when the reason why I wrote the book is that there's actually more common ground around clean energy and climate solutions than most people realize, and more than anything else, there's really not that many issues that people really across the aisle can agree on, but clean energy is one of them, right? And it's like 85% of Americans are, pro 100% clean energy. It's like,
yeah,
what else do 85% of Americans agree on? It's like, it's like, there's really not a lot. So that to me is like, when we look at this broader question of the political divide, what are areas of collaboration and finding common ground, and clean energy is like top of the list. So that to me is like it's both great for the country in terms of how we can potentially start to bridge the divide and, like, heal the wounds, but it's also just phenomenal news in terms of climate change. Like, we can solve this thing faster than we realized because there is so much sort of support on both sides. It's also about how does our country, how do scientists' messages reach people, and who are the um, messengers, and what's the message, and how is it being explained to people? Because and this is something that scientists will talk about often, is that it's like, you know you've got scientists in the lab like figuring stuff out, and then how do you communicate that in a simple way that translates? And often what's happening is it's going from the scientists to the politicians to the media to the average American, and it's like through that game of telephone, the science isn't being communicated well. And then of course we also have like all this misinformation, right? You have all these you know intentionally sort of wrong, sort of scientific opinions being, spread so that there's confusion, and that's a huge question. I don't know what folks can do about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, coming from sort of the media side, it is a very big issue that we need to work on because there's a misunderstanding on giving both sides time
Mhm.
and recognizing the weight of importance of each of those sides, and there's just some disconnect there on how much attention we should be giving to each.
Yeah, it's obviously one of the chapters of the book, right, where we're talking about, yeah, that depending on how much somebody watches Fox, their beliefs in climate change are directly related, right? It's like if they're
Yeah.
just a Fox viewer, their belief in climate change is going to be drastically lower than somebody who's not a Fox viewer at all, or somebody who watches a little bit of Fox, right? And it's like it's night and day, right? I mean, these are Media Matters is the organization that does that great research, and yeah, I think it's a huge question. We tend to villainize or demonize like people on the other side,
Hmm.
and it's largely because all we're shown from the media that we consume, usually, right, is a very like sort of a not realistic sort of caricature of like, well, everybody on the right is like this, and
Right.
and they're all storming the Capitol, and et cetera, right? And it's like, and everybody on the left is like this, and they're all um, socialists or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, well, neither one of those are accurate. They're extreme views that are,
Hmm.
and I think it's important, especially, let's be honest, most people reading the book are going to be um, more liberal or left, people who are more concerned about climate change, right? Like, I doubt anybody storming the Capitol is picking up a copy of Climate Courage. Although if they did, that'd be great.
That'd be
Um,
great.
right. So, and I think it's important for us on the left to realize that the same way that we look at the extreme right and we say, my goodness, how could they believe all that stuff, right?
Hmm.
Um, that's the same views that they have about us, because they're being
Right.
fed a vision and a sort of picture of us that's not accurate.
I think we need to figure out our way of advertising ourselves and
Right.
differentiating between like social media and
Mhm.
talk show hosts and
Yeah.
more of the politicized media and local news and the actual like people that are out there doing good work and getting the information and
Yeah.
holding people accountable because there's there's a difference. So what got you to finally write this book? Because you said in the book that you had been pining with the idea of writing a book for a really long time. What was the thing that finally tipped you over the edge? They're like, I need to do this.
That's a good question. So Robert Redford, the famous actor, um, his son Jamie Redford started a nonprofit organization called the Redford Center, and they make environmental and other social justice related documentaries. And one of my board members at Revolve, a guy named Clint Wilder, he and I went to go see an early screening of one of these documentaries. And Jamie Redford the director of the film, made a movie called Happening, a clean energy revolution. And it's a really great movie for anybody who's interested in this space. I highly recommend it. And in it, Jamie, who's a friend of mine, who's recently passed away, um, he goes around the country and he interviews with people. The path that he takes in the film is very much related to the stories that I tell in the book. So he meets with Dale Ross, the Georgetown mayor, who I had never heard of before watching that movie. He goes and meets with the Department of Defense, et cetera. And so I had had this idea for a book for many years, and it took different iterations. And I had written previous versions of it, and just kind of had, like 70 pages single space, like in a Word document saved somewhere. But like I hadn't
Yeah.
really known kind of what to do with it. And I went, and so Clint and I went to go see this screening of the film, and we went to grab dinner afterwards. And I was and it was the themes of the movie were so closely related. I felt like the message of the movie was the same message that I've been trying to put into words in the book, which is that we can come together around climate change, and that there's more commonality. There's more people on both sides working towards solutions than we realize. And I basically explained to Clint, um, I know of a lot of these people and these stories because I work in the space, and like I see these examples all day long, and nobody out there um, really is aware of how much momentum there is, right? And so I told that to Clint, and Clint basically said, he's written two books. One was called Clean Tech Revolution, and another was called Clean Tech Nation. And so he was experiencing the space, and I basically explained the concept of the book that it basically been rattling around in my brain for many years, and I kind of explained it to him, and he said, "Well, look, I've got an agent, who I think would be interested." And his agent is a woman named Leah Spiro, out of New York, and she's got a firm called Riverside Management. And I spoke with Leah, and she thought it was great, and that was, we were kind of off to the races. But the idea was just many years had been brewing, um, because again, I feel like there's a way to reach people, and thankfully, now there's so much more consensus around climate change than there was when I had originally thought about the book back in, say, 2008.
Right.
Um, but and I had more examples to show. But back then, when I originally thought about writing the book at the same time that I started Revolve, and basically thinking like we need a way to break through to people who are not included in this issue, people who feel like, oh, it's this other issue, it's over here. I don't really know how to engage with it. I don't really know too much about it. I know Al Gore's involved. I don't really like him. So like, what am I supposed to do with this? Um, uh, you know, and so it was like, okay, how do we make this more approachable? How do we make this more, something that people can feel like it relates to them in their community? And that was basically the theme of it. And it just, took a few years to kind of hone it in. But once I got the shot, it was very clear as to like what I wanted to write, and it all kind of flowed pretty easily when I was writing it.
Yeah, yeah. That kind of partially answered my next question, which was, how did you decide what things you would put in the book? Because it's just such a big topic, you know. Um, and I also noticed that you didn't mention solar very much until like chapter 7, 8-ish. So you like held off, you like held on to you're going, I want to talk about the solar industry until further on.
Right.
So what made you decide what the chapters were going to be? What made them the most important chapters to do?
Yeah, I think, originally, the concept of the book actually, got a lot of direction from Leia, my agent, and then also Amy Caldwell and the team at Beacon, who was my publisher, who helped me revise and sort of think about how to move the pieces around, because I actually had a different kind of idea originally. The original idea was going to be, where we are in terms of the psychology, and that to me is really the most important aspect of the book, and it's what, like you said, George Marshall talks about and Don't Think About It. That to me is the real innovative work that's being done, because the climate movement has been on this same messaging tip for
Yeah.
decades, right? Of uh, it's the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and it's getting worse every day. It's like, okay, well, like besides those of us that already get that and are like working towards it, you're not winning over any new converts by that.
Right.
Like
Right.
you're not. And I think that that was just like a gut instinct that I had. I mean, I grew up in Staten Island, New York, which I don't know if you're familiar with the area, but it's like the Republican stronghold of the five boroughs of New York City. So I sort of, I mean, in some ways, kind of like a fish out of water. So I feel much more comfortable in San Francisco. Sort of in terms of political ideology,
Hmm.
but 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 uh, but it gave me a sense of like how do people on the right view these issues, and to me it was like, well, they're just people who are already sort of set in their beliefs, their political views. You're having a march with people with painted faces and the polar bears. It's like, you're not winning anybody. You're not.
Right.
You're really not. And so that was like, it was so instinctual to me that that was the case, that it forced me to want to read the literature and read about the Yale climate change communications program that's run by Anthony Lizerowitz. Does this phenomenal research, and then George Marshall, um, and even all these other psychologists, Daniel Kahneman, Daniel Goleman, people who I was reading it, and in some cases they directly tied what they were talking about of how the mind works to climate change, but in other cases they didn't. But to me, it made sense as to why these are related. I feel like
Right.
that's, in my opinion, the biggest contribution of the book is laying out how the human mind responds to threats, and that in order for us to get more support around climate solutions, we have to first reach people emotionally, and then we can reach them rationally or logically. That those different systems of the brain are so important for us to understand, because I feel like the climate change movement is doing themselves a disservice
Hmm.
by rattling the same messages off and off, for decades. So that to me was really important. I wanted that to be up front. Um, I kind of wanted the middle section of the book to be like this history, looking at like previous chapters of history that
Yes.
where Americans were more connected to each other. There was more civility. There was more unity, as Joe Biden's calling for. Right. It was much less divisive. And looking at the various chapters and seeing how we had solved problems before, and then saying, how do we apply that to climate change? And then it was like towards the end, I was going to get into like, oh, and here are cool couple of examples, of these things. And basically, my agent and my editors and no, those are like, that's what's cool, is that you have all this knowledge about these stories that are happening now. So that
Yeah.
needs to be like that needs to be like the crux of the book. So that was really helpful. And I tried to like put the history stuff in there. I talk about briefly, like during World War II, the fact that 40% of the vegetables grown in the country came from people's like backyard gardens and these like victory gardens. So I tried to like pepper that in. But frankly, I actually I'd written a lot of stuff that I had to cut because it was too long. So maybe that'll come out in a future book. But yeah, so I'd say I had some suggestions around that. Now the other thing was, the end of the book, the last chapter, where the last two chapters, where it talks about like the value shifts, right? And it's like we need to shift away from focusing on wealth and consumerism and our fascination with technology and being kind of isolated individuals, and really focusing on what I describe as simplicity, service, and gratitude, right?
Hmm.
And so to me that was like, I mean, honestly, I could write a whole book about just that,
Yeah.
and would almost want to. And there was actually, yeah, some pushback, oh, is this really relevant? We needed to cut the book down. Can we cut it? I was like, this has to be in there. This is like, to me, this is, one of the most critical messages of the book. I wish it was a longer piece. So I tried to like, summarize my thoughts there. But that's, at the end of the day, that to me is the most important thing. Um, like in the middle of the book, we're talking about all these examples and the benefits of clean energy and climate solutions and how it's saving money and creating jobs and all this stuff and it's benefiting the economy. And like that's all cool. And I'm glad people are going to hear that reading the book. But really the messages that I wanted to get across were, the opening in the book, which is there are ways to reach people and build consensus across the political divide. And here's the psychology around it. And then the last chapter of the book, which is climate change is really like we have the technical solutions, but it's really a symptom of a larger problem, which is
Yeah.
that we're moving away from the values that make human beings feel fulfilled and happy and live sort of satisfied lives.
Yeah.
And that we can put up solar panels all we want, but unless we actually shift our values as a culture, we're going to keep running into problems like climate change that we're trying to fill a void with consumerism, with wealth, with distraction that's never going to fill the void. And we have to be focusing on the things that actually do give us fulfillment, like living more simple lives, living sort of our human relations, gratitude for everything that we have, and service, like giving back to each other, which shows that it makes us happier than anything.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a hard shift for a lot of people because they want it to just be a capital fix. They want it
Yes.
to be a infrastructure fix and not a mental shift. And so it's an interesting problem for people to realize that in the individual sense, yes, you could buy those sustainable items and all that kind of stuff, but in the end, you have to change your mentality, which is really it's hard because it's
Yeah.
so ingrained in our culture.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I think hopefully the opportunity that the book provides is a conversation starter, right? That you could read this. For example, I mean, you're a perfect example, right? You like have a YouTube channel and you talk about it, and hopefully the people who are listening to that, right? Like and you're having the chats back and forth, during that event. But hopefully more and more people can read it, think about it, and say, yeah, um, maybe it would be nice for us as a culture to slow down a little bit and take a little bit more time for each other. And honestly, I think that one silver lining of the pandemic is that, right? Is that we've been
Yeah.
forced to slow down and it's a reminder of what really provides fulfillment, which is like each other, right? And so we're all, we're more isolated and like, anybody, you could ask anybody, like, what do people want to do? They want to go to a concert. They
I
want
want to
to
hug my grandma.
hug your grandma, you want to like hang out with your friends, right? You
Mhm.
want to like, uh, do all these things that we can't do. And it's just an interesting reminder to us as to like, what actually do we value? What actually gives us the most benefit as opposed to us working all the time, trying to save up money for the fanciest iPhone or whatever.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. With all these changes that we are starting to see, I want to be pissed off about the fossil fuel industry and making us wait for such a long time to
Yeah.
get shit done.
Yeah.
But do you think we would be able to make all the necessary changes in the right way back in the 80s when we did not have some of the technology that we have today, like for energy storage purposes and for grid upgrades?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's no question that the fossil fuel industry um, is the main culprit in the climate crisis. Not only because the product that they sold was, torching the planet, but because they knew it and they doubled down on it and they lied to the public and they lied to investors about it.
Yeah.
So, and they basically, one of the important points um, that we touch on in the book is that back in the 70s, the environment was not a partisan issue, right? Like you had
Right.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, people who were putting in environmental regulations and were touting themselves, and George H.W. Bush touting themselves as conservationists, right? People who were, we're the conservative party. We want to conserve nature and protect,
Right.
the creation. And it wasn't until, you get into, George H.W. Bush and then beyond, where the fossil fuel industry basically realized what was happening, came up with a plan to put all this money into a disinformation campaign, hired the same consultants that the tobacco industry hired, literally the same guys, like
It's
not even
literally
like, yeah,
it's such a conspiracy. Like I
yeah,
did a video on that and I literally was like the biggest conspiracy that actually happened. It's
yes,
ridiculous.
yes, no, it's a total conspiracy. And so that was like, they intentionally lied, knowing how high the stakes were. Like there's, I mean, the thing that was mind blowing to me when I was researching for the book is that they had scientists, back in the 60s and 70s that were predicting the way that climate change would happen pretty accurately. Like they basically were like, yeah, we're going to probably see 400 parts per million by the year 2000, which was like not far off, right? So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
so they actually had like a total clear picture of it. And rather
Right.
than, the executives that worked there saying, well, holy cow, we need to invest all, of course, they're also the wealthiest industry of all time. Well,
Right.
not at the moment, but historically. And basically, instead of saying we need to take, reinvest our profits into developing a new clean energy economy, which they could have, and they started to, right? They started to research this stuff and develop these technologies, and oftentimes they were buying patents and then, you know, putting them in the closet so that it wouldn't, compete with them.
Yeah.
They basically lied to the public uh, and ruined the chance that we had 30 years ago of solving this when we really knew, the depth of it. So I don't think that. So I think to answer your question, like, yes, the solar technology and the battery storage technology and the larger wind turbines and all this stuff is really coming into its own right now. I mean, it's really,
Mhm.
the costs are really coming down, but that's really just a matter of investment dollars. So had those, like, it was, those investment dollars that got invested in, building large scale manufacturing in the early
Yeah.
2000s, like we're seeing those costs drop now. But had that happened in the 80s, we would have had those costs drop, 20 years, 30 years sooner. So
Exactly. If we put all those market signals in the way we're doing things in the 80s, then we would have come up with that technology over time instead of having to do it super quick and like
yeah,
make a drastic change now.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, one part in your book that really like was very I just I think about this all the time is thinking about all the executives who have known that their products would cause climate havoc and proceeded to pursue the line of business regardless, lying to the public and buying politicians to protect their profit margins. I can't help but wonder when they play with their kids and grandkids, don't they ever ask themselves, what kind of world am I leaving them? And I think about that all the time. I'm like, I mean, John Kerry, for example, when he was signing the Paris Climate Accord for the first time, he had his granddaughter on
Yeah,
his lap. He
yeah,
did make that connection. That was so freaking wholesome. Um, but there's so many executives that they're either not making that connection or they're actually just like ignoring it and okay with leaving their kids a worse world than they had.
yeah, yeah. And
Does
again,
that make sense?
it does, it also goes back to the psychology of how are they making that disconnect? Are they saying to themselves, well, I've got a good job. I don't want to rock the boat. I've got to protect, I got to put food on the table. Future generations will think about this. Um, are they, are they saying to themselves, well, I'm not going to be around, I don't have to deal with it.
Right.
Are they saying, or are they just, is it peer pressure, or are they just so, driven by the money, right? Like, oh, this is, what the stockholders want or whatever. But that's, it's an interesting question, because especially now when you have our government having so much influence from corporate entities and Citizens United and all this stuff that gives corporations a voice in the government and allows them to put their money into it. It's as if they have a conscience, but the corporation itself doesn't, because it has
Yeah.
all these rules and laws. They have to maximize shareholder profits, right? It's in the books, in the law, it's how they have to do it. So they're not moral actors, and so it's this weird dilemma where it's like, yeah, these people obviously knew what was happening, but somehow they were in a structure that did not allow them, or it didn't incentivize them to do anything about it. So it's a fast. I would love somebody to write a book on that. Interview those people and be like, why did you do this? Or the tobacco
Seriously.
industry, same thing. It's like you work in the tobacco industry, like it's like all these studies causes cancer. Like instead of like, oh wow, we should do something about this, they're like, we're just going to hire these consultants to lie to everybody so that
Right.
we can get another 20 years worth of killing people under our belt.
Yeah. Yeah. And that begs the question, is our current system that is relying on constant growth and valuing GDP over like personal happiness and human connection, you know, that does that need to change? And is it
Absolutely.
possible to get enough support for it to change
Yeah.
too?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's one of the kind of goals of the book is to say, um, really to ask people like, how happy are you? How happy does the current economic, consumer capitalism, American model that we have work for you? Is it really working for you? Or is there a longing for something else? Is there some deeper knowing that says, we probably could be living in a more holistic, community-based, sort of, engaged way that gives us more fulfillment, that doesn't have to be this hard, that doesn't have to be this cutthroat, that doesn't have to be this so vitriolic, right? Like,
Hmm.
what are the and if you ask yourself that question, you say, yeah, I think we probably could have a better setup. And you look around the world and it's like, oh, Canada's got healthcare, and like these other places have free education, and like,
Yeah.
it's like, well, maybe it would be a little bit better in these other ways. um, and if enough people start asking themselves that, and you have that conversation, right, then maybe things can change.
It hit on so many important topics that I think a lot of people need to hear.